Hello, listeners. It's Gunter here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self-development and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked #1 in Australia and #5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spigener-Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome back to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host. And today I want to get into cracking the idea that men always need to be invulnerable, unshakable, and always in control. But there's the truth. Real strength actually comes from vulnerability, from being open to growth, connection, and transformation. So today I want to take a really close look at why embracing vulnerability isn't a weakness. Not only is it an act of courage, but it's the very thing that makes us flexible and adaptable. Now, how did this sort of myth come about? Well, it's part of our social sort of constructs and matrix. Most of us from the time we're boys were told that being a man means being strong, means being independent, and most importantly, never show weakness. Phrases like man up, boys don't cry, tough it out, aren't just casual sayings. They shape the way we think about what it means to be a man. I remember being at an airport and watching a family sort of heading towards the embarkation zone. And obviously Dad was going on a business trip and he leans down. There was a boy, a girl, and another girl, obviously his kids. And the boy was, I'd say, in the middle of that little threesome of siblings. Dad leans down and says to what looked like a 5-year-old, "Now, when I'm gone, remember, you're the man of the house." Now, you can imagine what that sort of stuff does to a kid at 5. I mean, on one hand, he's puffing out his chest, but on the other hand, he's actually petrified. Because what the hell does that really mean? And by the way, when he gets home, Mum still tells him what to do. So these sort of mythologies and these sorts of sayings that we imbue our children with, especially our sons, aren't necessarily useful or healthy. I remember working with a Jewish boy who just had his bar mitzvah. And after the bar mitzvah, I sort of asked him, I said, so what's it like, this transition into manhood? And he goes, well, great party, but, I get home and mum still tells me to go to bed at 8 o'clock. I'm not allowed to stay up. So what's happening? So we had a bit of a chat about, that our development doesn't just start and stop with a party. It goes on. So one of the things that I want to point out is that these myths create a wall between us as men and our emotional world. They cut us off from connection, self-awareness, and actually healing. Now, I'm not here to demonize masculinity. I'm basically here to say that what we're expected to live by, these rules about what it is to be a man, the traditional stereotypical man, is essentially an outdated, rigid version that's really hurting us. And this is a theme that I keep coming back to. Suppressing emotions doesn't make us stronger, it makes us more fragile. Emotionally, it makes us prone to anger, feelings of isolation, and to a large degree, self-destruction. We also see it play out in our relationships, in our workplaces, and in our health statistics. When we buy into the myth of male invulnerability, we risk damaging our relationships. So, what does embracing vulnerability really look like? Because I get this question asked all the time. Yeah, but what does it mean? And, there's a pathway in therapy that I take people through where I try to get them comfortable with a range of emotions, right? And not judging feelings. It also begins with rethinking that idea about strength and the relationship to real resilience. That this is not about enduring pain in silence, but actually sitting with our emotions and embracing them in order to be able to work through them. So, if we're acting according to a script, let's flip the script. What if I told you that vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools for personal and social growth? When we allow ourselves to feel, to share, to be seen fully, we build deeper relationships and we have the opportunity to heal and to grow. We begin to connect more authentically with others. That creates a ripple effect that extends beyond our personal lives into society as a whole. For a moment, think about men that you admire most. Are they the ones who pretend to have everything figured out? Or are they the ones who show up with honesty, admit their struggles, and lead with compassion? I'd argue that the greatest leaders, thinkers, and change makers have all had the courage to be vulnerable. Dr. Brené Brown, a research professor at the University of Houston, has extensively explored the role of vulnerability in personal and professional growth. In her 2012 TED Talk, she stated vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And boy, do we as men and the world need some constructive change right now. Brown emphasizes that embracing vulnerability is essential for fostering innovation and creativity because it involves taking risks and facing uncertainty. However, social norms often condition us as men to avoid vulnerability. As we've said, the problem with this is that avoidance can hinder emotional expression and personal development. Brown seriously advocates for a shift in perspective. So, what are the social and psychological costs of vulnerability. Studies show that men are less likely to seek help for mental health issues. And the rates of suicide, male suicide, continue to be alarmingly high. Why? Because too many of us still believe that asking for help is admitting defeat. But what if we saw it differently? What if asking for help was seen as an act of strength, of self-awareness, of real resilience? The pressure to perform masculinity in a rigid way doesn't just harm men, it affects all of us. Again, we keep going over the same ground. Relationships suffer. I suffer. Families struggle when dads don't or can't communicate openly. And society loses when men feel disconnected from their emotions and the emotions of others. Empathy is compromised. Now, what's really important to understand here is that when we bottle up emotions, they don't just disappear. We're not just a conscious automaton. To our psyche, there is a conscious level, a subconscious, and an unconscious level. And the suppression of emotion operates in a way that often goes unnoticed, but significantly impacts behavior, relationship, and overall well-being. So what am I talking about? Well, the conscious is obvious. It's what we tend to openly think, speak about, relate to. What's going on at a subconscious level, though? The subconscious mind stores experiences, learned behaviors, and social conditioning that influence how we men react to emotional situations. When emotions like sadness, fear, or vulnerability are suppressed, the subconscious finds indirect ways to express them. Right? So how does that happen? Well, firstly, through some sort of emotional leakage. Unprocessed emotions surface as irritability, frustration, or passive-aggressive behavior. A man who suppresses sadness might actually lash out in anger instead. Also, there's cognitive dissonance. There's an internal conflict between my social expectations, men should be strong and unemotional, and natural human emotions. This can lead to feelings of shame or guilt when those feelings arise. There's also another aspect to this, which is behavioural compensation. Men may overcompensate in other areas, such as becoming hypermasculine, seeking dominance in relationships, or excessively pursuing success to validate their own self-worth. Why? Because they feel insecure, they feel unsafe, and so fear and anxiety is a part of that realm. So fear is a natural emotion. Anxiety is the reaction to a set of internal reactions to fear, to our beliefs about ourselves, to our attitudes. The one thing that I often do see with, men working through the subconscious material is that there's frequently an avoidance pattern evident in what they're talking about. The subconscious mind may steer men away from emotional situations. And so what does that look like? Well, they might distract themselves with work, hobbies, or excessive screen time rather than face difficult emotion. That also includes substance use, alcohol, gambling, and pornography. Right, so let's move on. Deeper down lies the unconscious level. So what happens in the unconscious mind? Well, it contains deeply buried emotions, past traumas, and primal instincts that shape behavior without any conscious awareness. When emotions are repressed long term, they can manifest in some really destructive ways. So what occurs then is that repressed trauma resurfaces, like childhood experiences where emotions were invalidated or punished, can unconsciously drive adult behavior. such as struggling with intimacy, fears of rejection, or feeling unworthy of love. Another defense mechanisms that comes to the surface is projection. Unacknowledged emotions are projected onto others. A man who represses his own fear might perceive others as weak or overly emotional, leading to criticism or judgment. Okay, so think about it. I'm not going to give you any examples right now about that. The next one is that we actually get somatic symptoms. What does that mean? Well, the unconscious often communicates through the body. Chronic stress, tension, headaches, or digestive issues often result from emotional repression. Now we come to a biggie, self-sabotage. When our feelings remain unprocessed, they can unconsciously influence decisions, leading to patterns of destructive behaviour, like self-isolation, risky behaviours, or substance abuse. Again, this comes up frequently. Another aspect to this is compulsive behaviours. Unconscious emotional distress can drive more addictive behaviours, like the chronic workaholic is a classic example. And the other part to this is it basically is an attempt to numb or escape our feelings that feel unsafe to express. So in my practice, one of the things that I frequently see is men coming to see me, and they have usually gone to their GP because they're either feeling anxious, depressed, chronically stressed, burnt out, a whole range of, clinical pictures that they've presented to their doctor. Now, one of the things that's currently absolutely part of the treatment of these states is that we use medication. And I need to say up front that I'm not against medication. I've said this before, but we're overusing them. Because one of the things that happens is that the role of medication has become one of suppressing feelings. If I talk to anybody who's on antidepressants, and these days they're all often on multiple types of medications, all of that is there to suppress, and it's argued that it's there to suppress symptoms and make them feel better, but it's also suppressing emotions and self-awareness. So this way of trying to deal with emotional distress through psychopharmacology, the use of medication, has some serious drawbacks. Now, again, while medication can be a crucial tool for some individuals dealing with severe mental health conditions, we need to be cautious about using it as a blanket solution to emotional distress, especially when that emotional distress is actually a healthy reaction to a toxic environment. One of the things it also does that is that it doesn't really allow the addressing of the root cause of the emotional pain. Many men turn to antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications without engaging in therapy or developing emotional awareness. And as I said, while medication can help in certain cases, relying on it without deeper self-exploration can keep men trapped in emotional suppression rather than healing. True healing comes from potentially integrating medication when necessary with therapy, with self-reflection and open conversations about emotions and the situation they're in, the way that they communicate and the decisions that they make. Instead of numbing our pain, we need to learn how to process it, sit with it, and ultimately grow from it. Emotional growth doesn't happen overnight, but it is essential for leading a fulfilling life. So as I wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with this thought. The strongest thing a man can do is to be honest with himself, with others, and with the world. Vulnerability is not an enemy. It is a key to transformation, to connection, and to true masculinity of your choosing. So let me challenge you this week to take a step forward embracing your vulnerability. Maybe it's having a real conversation with a friend rather than the superficial one. Maybe it's allowing yourself to cry without shame, especially in front of someone. Or maybe it's just sitting with what you're feeling instead of pushing it away. This journey isn't easy, but if you want to live fully, it's necessary. And more importantly, you don't have to do it alone. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's create the ripples in the pond. It's not just a right, but it's also a responsibility to allow yourself to feel whole. And as always, don't forget to follow Inspire Change with me and leave a review. Look at how you can contribute. So until next time, keep growing, keep questioning, and keep inspiring change. And this is me signing off for the week. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.